Amphibia's conclusion is rapidly approaching, and with that, lots of loose ends are being tied up. So, I thought it would be fun to try and predict how the next episodes are going to play out. Now, spoiler warning, I will be talking about Amphibia's latest episode at the time of recording, which is The Core and the King. Now, speaking of The Core and the King, this episode is a great place to start our discussion. This episode was full of information. We got a look into King Andrias's past, we got a look at how Amphibia was 1,000 years ago, and we see the events that lead us to where Amphibia is today. The episode shows us young King Andrias and his friends, Barrel the Toad and Leaf the Frog. Andrias is set to become king and lead the next interdimensional invasion on Earth. But things don't go quite to plan. Andrias shows his friends the Calamity Box, the source of Utopia's power and a gateway between worlds. While goofing off around the Calamity Box, Leaf accidentally touches the stones on the music box and this happens. After seeing this vision of the future, Leaf steals the music box. Now we can figure out what happened to Leaf after this. As she flees Utopia, she says she must find the Ohms. This is also backed up by Mother Ohm, who says there hasn't been a frog there in about 1,000 years, which is approximately when Leaf would have been there. Now it seems that the Ohms have the same prophecy as Leaf, since King Aldrich mentions them having a prophecy multiple times. Now, side note, Mother Ohm has a leaf on her head that looks very similar to the pin on Leaf's outfit. Now, I don't know if this has any meaning at all, but maybe Leaf told the Ohms about her vision, and they added it to their prophecy. And maybe that's why Mother Ohm, the keeper of the prophecy, would have it there since Leaf helped make the prophecy. But anyway, tangent aside, after seeing the Ohms, she decides to take the Calamity Box to Earth, so Andrews can't use it. I believe Leaf went with the Calamity Box to Earth, since on the vase at the museum we can see a frog in the human world. Now, it's been theorized that Leaf is a planter, based on her similar appearance to Sprig, and I believe this episode helps confirm it. There is a scene where Leaf does a dance that mesmerizes any creature that watches. This dance is exactly the same as the hunting dance Sprig uses in the episode Ann Hunter. Sprig says that the dance has been in his family for generations. For me at least, this confirms that Leaf is a planter. This would also explain why Hop Hop has a book warning of the dangers of the Calamity Box. Leaf would have left that book as a warning for her ancestors. This also explains the lone moss man Anne sees. Leaf would have travelled to Wartwood to leave the warning for her ancestors and left the moss man she rode there, so he would have stayed in the valley and become an urban legend. Now, in my last video, there were lots of comments suggesting that Dr. P's Extraordinary Guide to Magic and Mystery was written by either Dipper or Stan from Gravity Falls, and the P stands for Pines. Now, the reason I didn't talk about this in my last video is because, from a storytelling point of view, I think it works a lot better if Leaf is Dr. P and the P stands for Planter. I believe that when Leaf takes the Calamity Box to Earth, she writes this book, and with her knowledge of the prophecy, puts the book in Marcy's path, because she knows that Anne, Marcy, and Sasha are the ones from the prophecy, and are the ones that are needed to save Amphibia, so she deliberately sets everything up so they get trapped there. Now, I don't know if Leaf can live as long as Andrews, but if she can't, she can still use her knowledge of the future to make sure things still fall into place. In Amphibia's previous season finals, Reunion and True Colors, the episode started with a flashback to Anne's birthday, the day the girls are sent to Amphibia. All these clips reveal a little more about what happened that day, and I think this season will be no different. This time I think it will show Leaf's escape to Earth, and then I think it will show her putting the Calamity Box in the shop and making sure Marcy sees the book. But before I go too much into the season finals, let's talk about the other upcoming episodes. Now, this next part of the video will be taking a lot of educated guesses. So, Amphibia's next episode to release is Newts and Tights. The description for this episode is, while on a recon mission, Anne and Sprig confront an old mentor. I believe the mentor will be Tritonio from the episode Combat Camp. In that episode, he was Anne, Sprig, and Polly's combat mentor, and he's also a Newt, so that fits in with the title. I believe in this episode they'll try and recruit him for the Resistance. The next episode is Fight or Flight. Its description is, Anne tries to rescue an old friend from one of King Andrias's robot camps. Now, I think there are a few candidates for who the old friend could be. My first idea on who the old friend could be is either Olivia or Union. They were last seen trying to save Marcy, but King Andrias stops them. We don't know what happens to them after this, but it seems likely that King Andrias would send them to the robot camps as punishment. This would also connect well with the next episode, The Three Armies. If it is Olivia or Union, they would likely be able to help persuade the Newts to join the Toads and Frogs in the Resistance. Another potential candidate for the old friend is Priscilla the Killer. She appeared in the episode Hopping Mall, At the end of the episode, Anne ends up befriending her. She says, "Don't be a stranger, Anne," implying we might see her again. She is also a Newt, so she could potentially rally the Newts for the Battle of the Free Armies. Priscilla did seem like the kind of person who could also thrive in an apocalypse, which could give her a leadership role to the Newts. And a third potential candidate is the least likely, but I also just wanted to bring it up, is Joe Sparrow. The only reason I bring this up at all is because the episode is called Fight or Flight, and Joe Sparrow can fly. We haven't seen Joe Sparrow since he saved Sasha and Graham, so I hope he's alright. But also, I think it's unlikely that he is the person they will be saving. The next episode is The Free Armies. Its description is Anne and Sasha must convince the frogs, newts, and toads to work together. I don't have too much to say on this episode. I assume we will see all the characters that the Resistance has recruited in this episode. Now, the next episode is where things start getting interesting, the beginning of the end. The description only says the final battle begins. There are no more descriptions for the next two episodes, All In and The Hardest Thing. I think it's safe to assume that in the beginning of the end, the army of frogs, toads, and newts will begin the battle against King Andrias' robot army. I believe at the end of the episode, our main cast of characters will make it into the Flying Castle. Now, for All In, I believe this title is fairly important. I think in this episode, Anne and Sasha will fight Darcy. Now, Mother Ohm says to Anne, as long as you retain a piece of the power, you can restore it to your friends. I think this is potentially how they will free Marcy from the core. They will activate Marcy's power, the mind power. Maybe that will allow Marcy to rid the core from her mind. Now, I don't really have anything to base this next segment on. Maybe using the Mind Stone power, Anne and Sasha will enter the core with Marcy. Then maybe Anne will have to use her heart power to help Marcy deal with her internal problems. And Sasha's strength to help Marcy get free of the core. This would use all of their powers to help save her. This could be why the episode is called All In. But I don't really have much evidence for that. I just thought it would be cool. But I do think in this episode, Marcy, Anne, and Sasha will unite and get all of their powers, and that's why the episode's called All In. Now, I don't think this will be the end of the core, since in the painting for the prophecy, we see the three girls facing off against a giant creature. Maybe this is a form the core takes after they free Marcy from it. Anne asks Mother Ohm about the stones, and she says this about the core.
Others believe their powers should be used for conquest. These conquerors, with their arrogance and greed, created an unnatural thing that does not sleep and will not die. The prophecy is our one shot at salvation, and we believe you three were summoned to save us from what we've become, the worst version of ourselves.
After she describes the core, she says you three were summoned to save us from what we've become, the worst version of ourselves. While this is said, we see a picture of the three girls facing against the creature. The description of them becoming the worst version of themselves sounds accurate to the core, since the core is a collection of all of Amphibia's greatest minds. And, as we learn from Darcy, the core purges itself of what it considers redundant memories. The core edits itself and deletes memories, making it a cold and evil machine. This to me sounds like it's becoming the worst version of the people it absorbs. That's why I think the picture could be of the core. But the creature could also be a metaphor for what has happened to Amphibia under Andrias' rule, the world becoming the worst version of itself. But now let's talk about the prophecy and Leaf's flashback. In the flashback, Leaf sees images of what Andrias has done to Amphibia, but we do see one other thing that hasn't happened yet, the moon falling out of the sky. Now, I don't really have a good answer for why this is happening, but here's what I've got. The only thing that I think of that could cause this is the Calamity Box. This could potentially be the effect of abusing the box's power and upsetting the ecosystem of the multiverse, as Leaf says. My other idea for what this could be is from Mother Ohm. She says the Ohms believes that the stones serve a greater purpose and should be left alone. Maybe the moon falling out of the sky relates to the stone's greater purpose. Maybe in the season final we'll find out what it is.
3 stars burning bright, come from beyond to expel the night. Should they fight or embrace the fall, their choice will determine the fate of all.
Now, the Ohms prophecy says the 3 stars will expel the night. Then it says, should they fight or embrace the fall? I think these lines have a literal meaning and a figurative one. I think its literal meaning refers to the moon falling. They must literally expel the night, which is the moon, and if they fail, they will embrace the fall, which is the moon actually falling on Amphibia. And the figurative meaning refers to them defeating the core and King Andrias. Now, the final episode is called The Hardest Thing. There's a lot I think can happen in this episode. First is, I think Anne will face a near-death experience. I believe this based on the pattern in the previous 2 season finals. In Season 1's final, Reunion, Toad Tower is falling apart and Sasha falls off. Anne grabs her just in time, but can't pull her up. Sasha sees the planters struggle to save Anne, and she decides that Anne is better off without her and lets go, sacrificing herself. She nearly dies, but is saved by Graham at the last second. Then in Season two's final True Colors, Marcy tries to save Anne and the planters from King Andrias by opening a portal to Earth. She succeeds in opening the portal but is stabbed through the chest. She sacrifices herself there to save them. After Anne and the planters escape, Andrias puts Marcy in a healing tank so she can become the host for the core.
Quick! Into the portal, everyone! Hurry!
The box!
Darcy, hurry! I just need to...
Now look what you've made me do.
I'm sorry for everything. Marcy!
Based on the pattern, I think it could be Anne's turn to sacrifice herself and have a near-death experience. And if it's not a near-death experience, I think she'll have to sacrifice something, which leads into the next title, The Hardest Thing. I think Anne will have to choose between Amphibia and Earth. In the prophecy it says their choice will determine all. I think they will need to destroy the music box to stop its power being used. And that might mean to save Amphibia, they destroy it and get stuck in Amphibia. Or the other way around, they might get stuck on Earth and not be able to ever get returned to Amphibia. So I think the hardest thing will be choosing between her family and her best friend Sprig. The hardest thing will be saying goodbye. But it's not all sad stuff. I have one final prediction to make. In the episode Escape to Amphibia, we see Anne do this.
I can do anything! What the...
What are you?
Anne, look! The portal! The portal? How is that possible? She's powering it, like some kind of human battery.
Anne used her power to power the portal that Terry creates. At this point, Anne doesn't even have her full powers. I think the Calamity Box will be destroyed, but the three girls will all get full control over their powers, and they will realize they can open a portal without the music box, just using their powers. And with that, we conclude my predictions. It'll be interesting to see how much I predict, but one thing's for sure, this final season's going to be amazing. I'm sure there's going to be lots of moving moments in these last few seasons. Not going to lie, probably going to cry. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. This one was very rushed, so I'm sorry it's not going to be as detailed as the last theory I did. Because it was so rushed, I didn't get a chance to cover the Hot Pop's death theory. I think there's a lot of evidence for that one, but I don't think it's going to happen, so I just didn't have time and I left it out. This one was just more of a fun prediction video, not as much a theory. If you guys have any other theories or topics you want me to cover, leave a comment below. But thank you for bearing with me. I hope you guys enjoy Amphibia's final season.